The glass chimed a sharp, piercing note that cut through the low murmur of the Savannah Country Club. 50 of the city's wealthiest elites went dead silent, their attention snapping to the head of the banquet table. Catherine stood there, her diamond necklace catching the chandelier light, flashing her signature sugary smile. Tonight was supposed to be my 30th birthday dinner. Instead, she raised her champagne glass and looked down at me with eyes as cold as river stones. She announced to the entire room that they were celebrating a special kind of generosity. She told her high society friends that her daughter was nothing but a troubled charity case, a burden they had adopted strictly for a tax deduction, and that it was finally time to cut the dead weight loose. A collective gasp swept through the room, down the table. My sister Brianna smirked, practically vibrating with glee. My adoptive father, Trevor, stared intently at his pristine white napkin, refusing to look up, a coward until the bitter end. Catherine waited for me to shatter. She expected the tears, the humiliation, the desperate apologies. My nails dug so hard into my palms they almost broke the skin. But I kept my chin leveled perfectly straight. I slowly turned my head and met the eyes of my date, sitting quietly beside me. He wore a sharp, tailored suit. Catherine thought I was entirely alone. She had absolutely no idea the handsome man sipping water to my left was an off-duty county sheriff, just waiting for my signal. To understand how we reached that explosive moment, you have to look back to a quiet Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 month earlier. The final bell had just rung at the high school where I teach. The hallways were echoing with the chaotic energy of teenagers rushing to freedom. I was wiping down the whiteboard, exhausted, when my phone vibrated against the metal desk. It was an unfamiliar number. Normally, I ignore those. But something in my gut forced my finger to swipe accept. The man on the other end introduced himself as the estate attorney for my late grandmother, Monique. He asked me to come to his office the next morning. My chest tightened. Grandma Monique had passed away 6 months prior. She was the only person in the Carter family who ever looked at me with genuine warmth. Catherine and Brianna treated me like an unpaid servant, and Trevor simply pretended the cruelty was not happening. But Monique used to hold my hand in the garden and tell me I belonged. I never understood what she meant. Not really. For my entire life, I operated on a single disparate delusion. I believed that if I just performed perfectly, if I shrank myself down, if I never caused a problem, Catherine would eventually love me. I spent 3 decades auditing for a seat at a table that was specifically built to reject me. Even when Catherine suddenly texted me about hosting a lavish 30th birthday dinner at her exclusive country club, a pathetic, hopeful part of my brain lit up. I went out and spent $400 on a beautiful emerald dress. I bought it because I wanted to feel worthy of the celebration. I was still trying to buy my way into my own family. But sitting in that dark classroom, gripping the phone, a quiet voice in my head whispered that Catherine did not do lavish favors without a cruel agenda. The next morning, I sat in the attorney's office. The air smelled of old paper and polished mahogany. The lawyer did not waste time with pleasantries or dense legal jargon. He slid a heavy cream envelope across the desk and told me Grandma Monique had finalized her estate planning months before she passed, entirely behind Catherine's back. My hand shook as I broke the wax seal. Inside was a finalized, legally binding deed to Monique's historic Savannah estate, valued at $2.5 million. My name was the only one on the document, but the deed was not the shock that made the breath leave my lungs. Beneath it was a faded photograph and a certified DNA test from 28 years ago. The lawyer leaned forward and explained the family's darkest, most fiercely guarded secret I was not a random orphan. I was the biological daughter of Gavin Carter, the family's disowned. Scandalous eldest son, Gavin had struggled with severe addiction, bringing endless shame to Catherine's obsessed, image-perfect world. When Gavin died, Monique quietly forced Trevor to take me in. Catherine had spent my entire life punishing me for my biological father's existence. I was the true blood heir to the estate. Catherine and Brianna had absolutely no legal claim to a single brick of that house. The revelations did not stop there. The attorney pulled out a stack of recent bank statements. Since Monique's passing, Catherine had been forging my grandmother's signature to illegally siphon thousands of dollars from the estate accounts to pay her exorbitant country club dues and maintain her fake wealthy lifestyle. She was terrified the truth would come out, which was exactly why she was throwing me this public birthday dinner. The attorney warned me that Catherine's plan was to humiliate me so severely in front of her peers that I would flee the state in shame, allowing her to quietly contest the inheritance in my absence. I left the office with the envelope clutched to my chest. The cool Savannah air hit my face. And for the first time in 30 years, the fog in my mind completely cleared. I drove straight to a coffee shop to meet my colleague and closest friend, Derek. I laid the documents on the table. Derek took one look at the forged checks and the DNA test, and his eyes widened. He told me I was walking into a slaughterhouse, and I could not go in empty-handed. We needed a strategy. Catherine thrived on her pristine public image. She needed an audience for her cruelty. So we decided to give her one, but on my terms. That afternoon, I hired an off-duty sheriff's deputy to attend the dinner as my official date. He would be my shield, my witness, and my executioner. The night of the dinner, the country club was suffocating in its own elegance. The dining room was wrapped in dark wood paneling, heavy velvet curtains, and the clinking of expensive silver. Catherine moved around the room like a queen holding court. She introduced me to her wealthy friends with that familiar, patronizing tone, subtly isolating me. Making sure everyone knew I was the outsider they were so graciously tolerating. The tension at the table was thick. I sat perfectly still. The heavy legal envelope resting against my leg under the tablecloth. The deputy sat to my left, playing the role of a quiet, polite gentleman. Then came the toast. Catherine's words hung in the air like poison. A troubled charity case. A tax deduction. She smiled, looking down at me, holding out a sleek leather folder. She announced to the room that since it was time for me to make my own way in the world, she had generously prepared a small severance package to help me relocate out of state. All I had to do was sign the papers. I looked at the folder. I knew exactly what it was. It was a predatory settlement contract designed to trick me into surrendering my rights to the estate in exchange for pennies. She was trying to extort me in front of 50 witnesses. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I tapped into the exact same calm, authoritative tone I used to shut down chaotic classrooms. I looked Catherine dead in the eye and thanked her for her honesty. I told the room that since we were clearing the air about family secrets, it was only fair that I shared a few of my own. I reached into my bag and pulled out the cream envelope. I dropped the DNA test directly onto Catherine's pristine white plate. I watched the blood completely drain from her face as I announced to the silent room that I was Gavin's biological daughter. I was the only true blood relative of Monique Carter sitting at the table. Murmurs erupted around the room. Catherine's wealthy friends leaned in, their eyes wide with scandal. Catherine's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Brianna lowered her phone, her smug smile vanishing into thin air. Then I dropped the deed and the bank statements next to the DNA test. I told Catherine that I knew about the forged checks. I knew she had been stealing from my grandmother's estate to pay the very country club dues that bought the food sitting on their plates. Before Catherine could even formulate a lie, the man sitting next to me stood up. He calmly reached into his tailored jacket, pulled out his gold sheriff's badge, and set it on the table. The collective gasp from the guests was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. He reached into his other pocket, pulled out a thick legal envelope, and officially served Catherine the 30-day notice to vacate the premises. I looked at Catherine, her perfect facade crumbling into sheer terror, and delivered the final blow. I told her she thought I was her charity case, but I was actually her landlord. And she had exactly 30 days to get out of my grandmother's house. Catherine tried to salvage her dignity. She desperately looked around the room, pleading with her friends, but they were already turning their backs. In the world of high society, nothing is more repulsive than exposed fraud. Trevor finally looked up from his napkin, his face pale, but I did not give him the chance to speak. I picked up my purse, thanked the room for a lovely evening, and walked out of the club with the deputy right beside me. You might think that was the end of it. But toxic people do not surrender gracefully. 2 weeks later, Catherine and Brianna were forced to move into a cramped, cheap rental across town. The humiliation was absolute. But Catherine was desperate. She attempted one final vicious strike. She submitted a heavily edited, out-of-context video of the dinner to the county school board, claiming I was mentally unstable, aggressive, and extorting my elderly parents. She wanted to ruin my teaching career, hoping that if I was fired, her lawyer could contest my mental competency in probate court and halt the eviction. She underestimated me again. She forgot that the school board hearings are public record. I walked into the hearing room with Derek by my side. I did not argue or defend my character. I simply handed the board members the unedited, high-definition recording of the entire dinner, proving Catherine's extortion and her admission of forgery. The board dismissed her complaint in under 5 minutes, but the damage to Catherine was irreversible. The local news caught wind of the scandal. The country club, absolutely horrified by the public relations nightmare and the confirmed theft, immediately invoked their strict morals clause. They permanently revoked Catherine's membership. She was entirely exiled from the only society she cared about. Simultaneously, my attorney filed an emergency ex parte injunction with the county judge regarding the forged checks. Armed with the irrefutable bank logs, the judge granted the freeze. Catherine discovered her bank accounts were completely locked when her credit card humiliatingly declined at a local grocery store. She had absolutely nothing left. Trevor, realizing the ship had completely sunk, left me 3 long, desperate voicemails begging for family forgiveness. I listened to the first 10 seconds of one, deleted it, and permanently blocked his number. That brings me to where I am today, sitting on the beautifully restored wraparound porch of my grandmother's historic estate. The warm Georgia breeze carries the scent of magnolia blossoms. For the first time in my life, this massive house is completely silent, and it feels like breathing pure oxygen. Surviving Catherine forced me to dissect the psychology of abuse. I spent years thinking I was broken, that I was inherently unlovable, but I finally understand the truth. Catherine did not hate me because of my flaws. She was terrified of me. I was the living, breathing ghost of Gavin, the family's deepest shame and her greatest failure. Every time she looked at me, she lost her perfect image. Her cruelty was never about me at all. It was an elaborate projection of her own paralyzing insecurities. She tried to make me small so she would not have to look at her own twisted reflection. If you are watching this and you are trapped in a home where you feel like an invisible ghost, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I paid for these lessons with 30 years of my life, and I am giving them to you right now. Rule number 1, the audition is a scam. True family, whether blood or chosen, does not make you perform for a seat at the table. If you are constantly shrinking yourself, buying expensive dresses, and swallowing your own voice just to earn a scrap of basic respect, you are in the wrong room. You cannot earn love from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Stop auditioning for a play you were never meant to star in. Rule number 2, silence is an absolute endorsement. For years, I gave Trevor a pass because he never actively yelled at me. He just looked away. But looking away is a choice. A parent who watches their child be systematically destroyed and does nothing is just as toxic as the abuser holding the knife. Enablers protect the system, and you owe them absolutely no loyalty. Cutting out the enabler is often harder than cutting out the abuser, but it is just as necessary for your survival. Rule number 3, the ultimate revenge is unbothered peace. Yes, keeping the estate was a massive victory. Watching Catherine lose her social standing was undeniably satisfying. But the true win was waking up this morning, making my coffee, and realizing that I do not care what they are doing. Their opinions of me are completely irrelevant. I took my power back the second I stopped needing their permission to exist. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you. Even if you share a last name, you do not owe your abusers an explanation, a second chance, or a graceful exit. Trust is earned. It is never owed. And your dignity is worth infinitely more than their comfort. If this story resonated with you, if you are sitting in the dark right now wondering if you are crazy for wanting to leave, I need you to know that you are not alone. Please leave your story in the comments. Share your survival. Read through the experiences of others and realize that there is an entire army of us who have walked through that exact same fire and come out on the other side. You do not need anyone's permission to belong to yourself. You never did. I am Vanessa Carter. And for the first time in my entire life, I am finally home. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are watching Vanessa buy that $400 emerald dress for a family that treated her like dirt. And you are shouting, why did she go? Why did she keep trying to win them over? Let me explain what was really happening. Toxic families operate exactly like a rigged casino. They starve you of affection and respect for years. And then, right when you're about to completely walk away, they drop a single crumb of hope. A grand birthday dinner invitation, a rare compliment. In psychology, this is called the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. Vanessa was not weak, and she was not naive. She was psychologically conditioned to crave the possibility that maybe just this one time, she would hit the jackpot and finally get a real mother. But in toxic dynamics, the house always wins. That is the psychological trap. But let us talk about how Vanessa finally broke the casino. Here are the 3 street-smart moves she made that secured her financial and emotional freedom. Move 1, building the case. Vanessa did not walk into that country club ambush blindly. She brought an off-duty deputy as her physical and legal shield. And she had her friend Derek silently screen record her sister's live stream. When you are dealing with narcissists, if a confrontation is not documented, it did not happen. Abusers will always try to twist the narrative after the fact. Always secure your own unedited receipts. Move 2, the audit strategy Scammers and manipulators absolutely hate details because they thrive in the shadows. Catherine was forging checks to pay her elite country club dues, assuming her fake authority would stop anyone from looking too closely. Vanessa and her attorney pulled the hard bank logs. You cannot gaslight a certified bank statement. When someone's actions do not make sense, follow the money. Because the math never lies. Move 3, refusing the buyout trap. At that dinner table, Catherine tried to hand her a settlement contract cleverly disguised as a generous severance package. Never, ever sign legal documents under extreme emotional pressure, especially in a public setting designed to force your compliance. Vanessa knew her true value, a $2.5 million estate, and she flatly refused to trade her rightful legacy for pennies just to escape an uncomfortable room. Now, every morning, I drink my coffee on Grandma Monique's wraparound porch while the Savannah sun climbs slowly over the magnolia trees. The house is quiet, but it is not empty. For the first time in my life, quiet does not feel like rejection. It feels like ownership. There are still boxes in the hallway. Some rooms are still locked because I am not ready to open every memory at once. But this house no longer feels like the place where Catherine played queen and treated me like a stain on the family name. It feels different now. The air is lighter. The walls breathe easier. Grandma Monique's roses are growing back in the garden. And every time I see them bloom, I think about the woman who knew the truth long before I did. She did not leave me a house just because of blood. She left me proof. Proof that I belonged before Catherine ever tried to erase me. Proof that I was not charity. Proof that I was not a burden. Proof that the people who called me dead weight were the ones living off stolen money, borrowed status, and carefully polished lies. That is the strange thing about people like Catherine. They spend years building a throne out of appearances, but the throne is hollow. One document, one bank statement, one unedited recording, and suddenly the entire kingdom collapses. She thought humiliation was a weapon only she knew how to use. She forgot that truth when spoken at the right table, in front of the right witnesses, can be far more devastating than cruelty. I used to imagine what I would say if I ever had the power. I thought I would scream. I thought I would list every birthday she ruined, every dinner where Brianna laughed at me, every time Trevor looked away while I was treated like an unwanted guest in my own home. But when the moment finally came, I did not need to scream. I only needed to stand up. That is what healing has taught me. Power is not always loud. Sometimes power is a calm voice in a room full of people waiting for you to break. Sometimes it is sliding a DNA test onto a white dinner plate. Sometimes it is walking out before your abuser gets the final word. And sometimes it is sitting on your own porch months later, realizing you no longer care whether they are sorry. Catherine lost the country club. Brianna lost the fantasy that cruelty would always be rewarded. Trevor lost the privilege of hiding behind silence. But I gained something far more valuable than a $2.5 million estate. I gained myself. Not the version of me who bought the emerald dress hoping to finally be chosen. Not the version who smiled through insults because she was afraid of being abandoned. Not the version who believed love had to be earned through obedience. That woman survived, but she does not live here anymore. The woman who lives here now knows that belonging is not something you beg for. It is something you build. She knows that family is not proven by a last name, a dinner invitation, or a performance in front of rich strangers. Family is proven in protection, in honesty, in the people who tell you the truth before the trap closes. Derek still comes by sometimes after school, bringing takeout and pretending he is not proud of me. Aunt Vanessa visits on Sundays and helps me sort through Grandma Monique's old photographs. In one of them, Gavin is standing on this very porch, young and smiling, before addiction swallowed his life. I used to think being his daughter made me part of the family's shame. Now I understand something Catherine never could. A person's pain does not erase their humanity, and another person's polished image does not make them good. So if you are watching this right now, still trying to earn love from people who only value you when you are useful, please listen to me. Stop auditioning. Stop shrinking. Stop mistaking proximity for loyalty. Some tables are not worth a seat, especially when the meal is poisoned with humiliation. You do not need to convince people of your worth when they are invested in denying it. You do not need to stay in a family system that treats your silence as rent. And you do not owe anyone access to your future just because they were present in your past. The night Catherine called me a charity case, she thought she was cutting me loose. She was right. She cut the last rope, holding me to a life that was never mine. My name is Vanessa Carter. I am not adopted shame. I am not dead weight. I am not anyone's tax deduction, burden, or dirty little secret. I am Monique Carter's granddaughter. I am Gavin Carter's daughter. And this house is finally home. If you have ever been humiliated by people who were supposed to love you, tell me what helped you stand up again. Because somewhere, someone is still sitting at that table, waiting for permission to leave. Let them hear the truth from us. They do not need permission. They only need proof that life exists on the other side of the door. Here is the final verdict. Your peace of mind is your single most valuable asset, and you are allowed to aggressively protect it. When you finally stop hoping for a toxic person to magically change, you take all of your power back. If you have ever had to build a legal or emotional case against someone you loved, or if you are still trying to find the courage to walk out the door, I want to hear from you. Drop your story in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button to join a community of survivors who know exactly what it takes to defend their peace. Stay smart, stay strong, and we will see you in the next video.